Hi there. I'm Peter Eisenman. I don't know why they asked me to do this, but you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio. I don't know what that means, but it sure must do something. Thank you very much.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Today, we're talking about an architecture TV series and a new design documentary. Joining our show are Mike Chapman of the CBS series ByDesign and IBM Archivist Jamie Martin. She's featured in the new documentary, Modernism Inc. Later, music direct from New York with Paget Moren. And now, here's your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. We don't see many architects in the news or popular culture. There's Rex Heuermann, architect and Long Island serial killer, the dad Mike in the Brady Bunch, Ted Mosby in How I Met Your Mother, Kanye West's new wife, the barely clothed Bianca Censori, who's called an architect but actually is not.
Oh.
And they apparently aren't legally married either.
Oh.
Tom Hanks' character in Sleepless in Seattle, and Keanu Reeves, who plays an architect in the 2006 movie The Lake House, where he and Sandra Bullock get upstaged by The Lake House.
And its mailbox.
Yes. Why aren't there more architects in TV and film? Well, unlike doctors, lawyers, police, firefighters, and FBI agents, there's just not that much high drama in architecture for the public. Who wants to watch a meeting on getting the lobby detail to comply with the 2026 building code? And then there are the long hours, annoying clients, stubborn builders, and slow bureaucrats. I'd like to see an architect's version of The Office, a cross between Dunder Mifflin and the Bjarke Ingels Group.
Yeah, I bet you would.
Visionary ideas clashed with budget limitations, eccentric personalities, and a boss who wants to turn every project into a public amenity. An EPA Superfund site becomes a daycare center. A sanatorium becomes the world's largest Trader Joe's. And a sewage treatment plant becomes a swim and tennis club. Hilarity ensues. Networks, please don't all call me at once about this. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Mike Chapman is the director of MWC Media and co-founder of the ByDesign franchise. With over 35 years of creating compelling television content, Mike is a respected international design commentator enjoyed by millions on CBS, Channel 10, and other streaming platforms. He got his start filming reality TV shows in Australia about fishing, cooking, and home renovation. Now he and architect and project manager Una Chapman have their own production company focused on bringing design content to network television. The ByDesign programs, which have branched out from architecture to industrial design, interiors, and landscapes, bring experts in design together to showcase and judge the work of architects and designers. His shows America by Design Innovation and America by Design Architecture are available on CBS. For such a high-level producer, he's a great sport to come on our intrepid but modest podcast. And we've had the pleasure to meet at national conferences. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me. Of course, what do you mean modest? Of course I'm going to come on your show. You're a legend.
You're very nice. So before we talk about architecture, let's get to the hard-hitting question first. Our research team uncovered that apparently you have a fondness for tubs. Lots of posts about tubs. Is this true or just a consequence of your shooting Hotels by Design?
Yeah, I think a consequence. You know, we're trying to dress up the story, get the crazy Australian middle-aged guy in the tub. You know, that's going to keep people watching.
Yes.
As long as you don't show too much flesh,
Right.
just from the shoulders up.
You're a tub model? Is that what we could say?
Yeah, accidentally. You're right. I've done a few tub scenes now when I think back through the stories. I think I've got more interesting stories to tell, but yes, I'm guilty as charged.
Now, I'm confident that most Americans know nothing about Tasmania, where you're from. So tell us about it.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Yes, I grew up in Tasmania. That's a little island. Some people think it's like Timbuktu or something, like a fictional place, but it's the little island at the bottom of Australia, of mainland Australia, if you look on a map. And it's kind of almost a little more New Zealand than Australia. It's kind of maybe got a little bit of a relationship to mainland Australia like Canada does to America, kind of a little bit picked on or something, I don't know. But it's a lovely little place. 500,000 people live there on an island about the size of Ireland, the country of Ireland. And once you step on the island, a little bit like Ireland, the country, it's actually quite regional focus, like crazy when you look at a map that it would be like that. But there's northern Tasmanians and there's south Tasmanians. I'm from the south.
So we can tell by your accent that you're a southern Tasmanian?
Yes, for the learned Tasmanians listening out there, for the one or two, you never know, they would probably pick that I'm from the south.
And the capital is Hobart?
Yes, that's my hometown.
And what about the devil?
Yes, exactly. The Tasmanian devil. It's not just a cartoon character. It is real. It's this smelly, growly thing about this bit like a small dog, and you don't corner it because it's got like half its body is jaws.
Oh.
And it could take your hand off, but mostly it's too shy it would only do that if you cornered it. Mostly it scurries away. And it had its cousin, the thylacine, or called the Tasmanian tiger, which became extinct, sadly, in the probably 30s or 40s, which was a bigger version of it. But yes, the devil, Tasmanian devil. In fact, they got a football team, Australian rules football team that they're just starting up, and they had to go argue the toss with, is it Disney, about getting their name back so they could call their football team the Tasmanian Devils.
Oh, yeah.
Did they win?
They did. I just read a thing about it. Yes, they did win, or they came to some agreement.
Yeah,
anyway.
Right.
Yes, Disney's soaking up all the intellectual property on the planet, slowly but surely.
Yeah. Nowhere is safe.
Now, before you launched the first ByDesign series, you spent years in TV reality shows. How did ByDesign come out of that?
Yeah, it was actually one of those horrid shows, kind of we all know the shows. I'm going to say HGTV type shows where there's some people are gone out of town and in comes the designer with his colourful scarf and they change the colours of the walls and rearrange the furniture. And then they surprise someone, and they call that a design show. So anyway, I was working on a similar show like that. And the architect on the show was actually a sort of fairly serious cat. I don't know what he was doing on this show, but, we were having lunch together on set and we were talking about we could do better than this. This is not representing design. There's somewhere between something that you put on your black turtleneck and sip a latte and seek it out on Netflix or something, a design show for design folk, and what I just described before. Somewhere in the middle there, surely there's a space for a popular discussion about design, an accessible conversation in front of a mainstream audience. So I was intrigued by that. I'm a TV designer, so I'm always looking for new ideas and new audiences. And that's where it was born from, actually, from that discussion. We did a pilot. We took it to Channel 10, which is kind of like the CBS of Australia. So that was kind of a big deal that we got a national platform on a Sunday afternoon, became popular. Then that Channel 10 was bought by the same people who own CBS. So that opened up the corridors to America. Along came COVID around the same time. And a lot of the shows that couldn't be made in America in that time. So they liked our show, so they gave us a chance on a 7:30 on a Saturday night in New York, which was just like what the hell? What are we doing?
Right, right.
We went from a Sunday afternoon show in Australia to America by Design on CBS on a Saturday night. Because now, what was the show? The kind of entertainment show, Entertainment Tonight, or what?
Like something
they
like
make that show,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so we were popped in there as a bit of an experiment, and now CBS love us. You know, they were a bit worried that we were going to kill their evening with this geeky design show on a Saturday night, because it's kind of a high pressure spot right off the back of the news.
Yeah,
but we didn't kill it. In fact, we built their audience. So that's one of our spots where some of our shows go there still today. I mean, thank you, COVID. I don't think we would have ever got that opportunity. I mean, I wouldn't have wished COVID on anyone, of course, but that's yet another COVID story, eh?
Hey, yeah. One of the things, Mike, that I like about your shows is that you don't ask viewers to suspend disbelief, to accept unrealistic time frames and budgets and turnarounds. It's much more elegantly presented, which is fantastic.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that guy with the scarf. Yes,
yeah.
He doesn't appear. Instead, our cast members are design luminaries. You know, Jeffrey Beers, Lauren Rotte, Bianca Ingalls on the show, et cetera, et cetera. These are our cast members. And we'll take a hit on the performance if we have to. We're more interested in the passion and the knowledge and the credibility that those people bring to the show. So, yes, our format is it's still light. You know, we play it pretty light. It's to a mainstream audience. I often talk about having a design conversation in front of a football crowd. I feel like that's what we're doing.
Yes.
Half the time.
We're doing that too, yeah.
Yeah, you guys are too. Everyone at a football crowd, you know, from doctors and lawyers to ditch diggers and everyone really. And that's good because like you guys, that's why I like what you do because I relate to it. You know, we're rising the tide just a little bit on the design conversations. You know, it's not elite, not an elite thing, design. We all actually consume design every day, whether it's your iPhone or whatever it is. It's all been designed. That's stuff that maybe Americans, and certainly where I come from, Australia is no different, we could learn. You know, we could learn a little bit more about what design is. Design is not fashion. That's another whole story. But a lot of people default to fashion. But this is different. That's my big speech there.
Oh, I find that design is something that lots of people appreciate, but don't quite know how to achieve it. Like you can look at a room and see that it just works. But if you had to do another one from scratch, what would you do? How would you create that? It's like I can be a fan without knowing the nuts and bolts. I need someone help with that.
Exactly. We can spot good design. We're really good. We, the general public,
right,
are really good at spotting bad design, just by the way, and we even call it that. So we're kind of halfway there. It's like, oh, this is badly designed. We'll say that as it falls to bits in our hands or it's not intuitive the way you use it. Good design is silent and fits in to your life, and so rarely gets reported on because it's not noticed. And that's what it wants to be.
I do notice, Mike, that some of your franchises, which are all over the world now, you're not just in America and in Australia, but you've expanded greatly. Some of the formats are competitions where you'll have people in a jury who are looking at different elements. And then it looks like some shows are just more presentations about design. How do you decide between the two?
Yeah, that really comes, you mentioned some of my history as a producer. You know, with some shows, I've actually taken some of those elements and I'm using them for good now because, you know, you need a little bit of jeopardy in the show, perhaps, you know, for those who are just trying to hang in there with this design show. If they're also thinking, oh, I wonder who's going to win the series. It's a oldie but a goodie.
Yeah.
It's an old trick, but it works well. I mean, that's the pure reason to just have another level of interest because we're playing in front of a popular audience. So how do we select our projects? It's a mixed bag. We're partnered with the AIA, American Institute of Architects, They love us, actually, because it's part of their charter to get the conversation going, the architectural conversation going to a broad audience. So, bam, we do that. So we go through their awards, with them. This project's cool, So that's one way. We have some partners, which are often from the design world or material suppliers to designers in the built world. Mm-hmm. So they have a place in this conversation. So we listen to them, what projects have they done recently? Yeah, so it's a patchwork quilt of how we put it together. That's important too. In an episode, in a half-hour episode on CBS, we'll have like 4 to 5 projects. In some of our earlier thoughts, we thought, let's theme it. Let's look at restaurants and cafes in this episode, or hospitals, or whatever. But the trouble with that is I'm not interested in hospitals, so you lost me, or in cafes or restaurants. So the trick is to keep changing the tone. So if we've got a hospital, which is kind of a rather lofty topic, the very next story needs to be like, I don't know, a wealthy person's apartment in New York,
right?
Just to bring us back, to something interesting. And then perhaps a public space in Chicago, and then a restaurant and a cafe. So our show and each story is like 4 to 5 minutes long, which, by the way, in this day and age is an eternity.
Yeah.
4 to 5 minutes on TV, but in this world of, swipe, mm-hmm. or whichever way you go on Facebook or whatever, that's a moment of substance. That gives us a chance to do a deep dive, maybe not for the design community. We always get messages from architects and interior designers, etc., saying, I wish I'd seen a bit more. Yeah, of course you did. You wanted to be 15 minutes, don't you? Carrying on about the juxtaposition of the beams or whatever. But I think we've got it right. At 4 to 5 minutes, for the general public, that's just enough time before we move on.
Yes.
Yeah, they all leave them wanting more, Maxim.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's an old showbiz trick.
Now, you have recently been at a fantastic mid-century modernist house in Hawaii. Tell us about that house.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, you would love this house, George. I don't know if you've been here. Lily Strand House, it's called. It's in the hills above Honolulu. It's a Vladimir Osipov design. So if you were somebody in Honolulu or in Hawaii in the 50s or 60s, you'd get your house designed by Osipov. But this is one of his earlier work. It was kind of one of the reasons he rose. This was 1952, this house was built. And it's by Dr. Howard and Betty Lillistrand. They weren't massively wealthy. There's your story behind them. They just wanted to design their house the way they wanted to live. So Betty, for example, had 11 pages, which you can see at the house. So this is like a house that you can go to. You can book tours and so on, and it's like stepping straight back into 1952. Everything there is the record players with the records are stacked just nicely. You can almost smell the cigarette smoke. I don't know if they smoked, but I bet they did. A doctor in 1952, of course he smoked. And the pool area is like a Slim Aarons photo, like those famous photos from the 60s.
Well, what are the characteristics of Hawaiian mid-century modern that might be different from, say, Southern California mid-century modern?
Yeah, I think they're quite similar. A lot to do with airflow, the trade winds.
Okay.
Osipov famously said that air conditioning is evil. And so he was one of the first, I think Hawaiians had it right, the original Hawaiians, but the first after contact of architects that really got it right, using the trade winds to cool the house. Yeah, I was there on a pretty hot, muggy day, actually, and I could see it working. It was pretty cool.
Mike, you have been filming in France and Australia, and you're going to go to the UAE next, where we took a group about a year and a half ago. That is a staggering amount of architecture. What are you planning to do in the UAE?
Oh, boy, we're just getting started. So we've partnered again with the AIA, the Middle East office in Dubai there. We're just wading through projects. talking to material suppliers and architectural firms. I mean, a lot of the architectural companies that we're already dealing with and have projects, again, using that term, if you're anyone who's anyone in the architectural world has a project going on in the Middle East or the UAE. So we're open, actually. We're open for conversation. We're looking right now for projects. We have filmed there once already, just as we have these spotlights, we call international spotlights in our other shows. So in America ByDesign, it's 95% American projects, but we leave a little bit of room for an international spotlight. So we've filmed a couple of projects already there. The Museum of the Future.
That was the building I was going to mention to you. I have been there. It is unbelievable.
Isn't it?
What an incredible accomplishment.
I know. And the big round circle. I wanted to fly our drone through the middle of it, but they already gave us some footage, so we didn't have to do it. So somebody else had already done that. Amazing. I mean, they really are creating the next center of the world there, aren't they? In that part of the world.
Miles and miles of unique buildings. I mean, not just cookie cutter, but very unique structures.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we want to do there is, of course, all the big boys are there, design-wise, but we want to highlight some local architects as well. That's important to us because it is, I guess, the big international companies are raising the standard of the local scene there. We want to cover that as well.
You can see all of this material, including Mike's shows around the globe, at bydesign.global. Is that right, Mike?
That's it, bydesign.global. Yeah, that's a deal where we're able to still show our shows in total. In fact, they're the producer's cuts, in opposed to on CBS, we're sandwiched in for a commercial half hour. So we deliver that to CBS, but online at bydesign.global, you see what we call the producer's cut. So the show's more like it's a sloppy 36 minutes, which is nice because we get to those extra little sentences when we're talking to the designers about why they did stuff. That's the show I like to watch the most.
Well, that's where those designers can get their extra information on the beams.
There we go. Yes, I point them towards that. bydesign.global. Exactly.
I do want to thank you, Mike, because we've had some mutual guests on our two shows, Richard Southwick, Christine Marvin, Anne-Marie Lebrano, and John Patrick Winberry, who I actually saw on your show first and immediately invited him to come on and talk about this amazing little jewel box house that he designed in the Hamptons. So thank you for what you're doing.
I remember that.
Yeah. Thank you for what you're doing.
We should work together more.
We should, yes.
A little more, perhaps.
A little more. Yeah. So thank you so much for what you're doing for the shows. I think it's a perfect mix of information and entertainment. You've really nailed it right there. And thanks for coming on and talking with us.
Oh, look, a pleasure. And congratulations with what you guys are doing. I love it. I've got to come on one of your tours.
Okay.
I haven't done that yet. Thanks for having me.
Corporate archivist Jamie Martin has a fun job. She managed the archival collections of the Target Corporation for 7 years before moving on to Big Blue, IBM. At IBM, she stewards a vast collection of artifacts, corporate records, audiovisual materials, and what they call born digital assets. Her job not only includes helping IBM employees find what they need, but also aiding in the development and authentication of IBM's public brand history. She also contributes to high-profile projects related to IBM history, including Modernism Inc., a documentary about the branding work of architect Elliot Noyes. George spoke with Jamie via Zoom.
Jamie, before we start talking about IBM, tell me about George Dayton and what he accomplished.
Oh my, so you're asking me about George Draper Dayton from the Dayton's Department Store?
I am indeed.
Okay, yes. So you're taking me back to Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yes, George Draper Dayton founded a store called Dayton's Department Store, formerly known as Dayton Dry Goods. And that was formed in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1902. Was very successful as a regional department store. It continued for almost 100 years, but somewhere along the way, around 1962, at this time his grandsons were running the company, and they realized that shopping patterns had changed, and they decided to form this little discount store called Target, which a lot of people might be familiar with.
I think a lot of people are quite familiar with it, yes.
Oh, yes. And it grew from 4 locations in Minnesota in 1962 to the large retailer that people are familiar with today in the United States, and eventually eclipsed the company. So the department stores were eventually sold off, and Target became the entire company. But Dayton's is still very much a beloved brand in the state of Minnesota, especially in Minneapolis.
So there's still stores up there of Dayton's or no?
There is not, although the original location still exists. And I believe it was a year or 2 ago that someone new has come in and is creating a new concept in that location called the Dayton Project. And they're trying to bring back a lot of the things that people loved about the original Dayton's, like the window displays at Christmas time and Santa Bear.
Oh, right, sure. And at one time, I understand they own Marshall Field's, another big retail chain.
Yes, they did. They purchased Marshall Field's in the 1990s and owned that for probably about 20 years or so.
Well, I didn't know, Jamie, until maybe 10 years ago, that there was even such a thing as corporate archivists that track histories like Target and like IBM. And you all have a professional association, don't you, where you all get together?
Yes, we're part of a larger group called the Society of American Archivists. And that has probably about 6,000 members or so. And there you're going to see archivists from lots of different backgrounds: academia, federal government, historical societies, nonprofits, and of course, us business archivists. And we have our own group called the Business Archives section. And there's a few hundred of us across the United States and also some in locations outside of the U.S. And we get together, about once a year, talk shop. We're a close-knit community, but a lot of the major companies in the U.S. do have an archives department and either a corporate archivist or a corporate historian as part of the team.
I've spoken with the archivist at Herman Miller, which is now Miller Knoll. Mm-hmm. But I was wondering, how many corporate archivists are there? How many companies are big enough and resourceful enough to want to monitor their own history?
That is a great question. I don't have an exact number. I can tell you that as part of the group that I participate in, there's probably about 400 to 500 members.
Wow.
But I'm sure that there are more that are not necessarily part of that professional group. You can find them in just about any type of business, whether it be a tech company like IBM, retailers, lots of fashion archives, especially in the last few years, that has really grown. Banking, finance. There's a good reason that a company should have a corporate archives, not only to be able to preserve the corporate memory, but also looking at ways that the archives can inform current decisions.
Now, how do archives work with, parts departments? Because, for instance, I assume that IBM is still servicing some of its old products and computers from way back, right? Or do they just cut them off at some point and say, we're not going to maintain your IBM 360 from 1975 anymore?
There's information that's available either by calling IBM or I think to a certain extent on the website as well. It does get to a point where something is so old that it's not necessarily actively serviced or maintained, but that is an area where we can often help because we do have things like operating manuals and product information sheets, things like that can help someone. More often, it's not so much someone who's trying to maintain something that they've been using for the past 40 years, but there's a lot of people who are interested in vintage tech and restoring vintage technology. And so having access to those original manuals and schematics and product documentation can be really helpful for people who are looking to do that type of work.
The first IBM product that I remember that was available for just normal people to have was the IBM Selectric typewriter. Was there anything before that? I thought most of IBM's products were for companies and institutions, and this was more of their consumer small office product.
You're right. I mean, most of IBM's product lines before that time really were geared towards businesses of some kind, whether you're a very small mom and pop shop and you're really just looking to get maybe a couple of scales for your dry goods department or a few electric typewriters. It would be larger companies that were investing in things like computers of the day. But this electric really did seem to make that crossover between something you would find in a business versus something that people might want to own for themselves. There were other typewriters before this electric that were very popular that people could have easily purchased for themselves, but something about this electric really seemed to make that connection with individuals as well.
And that something about this electric was the design, for one thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who designed the IBM Selectric?
So Elliott Noyes was responsible for designing the IBM Selectric, the look of the IBM Selectric. And there were many people that were involved with the mechanics and figuring out how to make the typewriter work effectively, especially with that unique font that tends to be referred to as the golf ball, because it's this little round ball that can be easily switched in and out if someone wanted to interchange the type of font that they were using. It was a really different design from the other typewriters in the market, because instead of having this incredibly large carriage bar that would be working its way across, and then you'd have to, bring it back to the left or to the right eventually, depending on what style of typewriter that you had, it took up less space. It was more compact. It had a very sleek design that people really liked. And most importantly, it worked well. That was something that I thought Elliott Noyes had a really great understanding of, is that it's not enough for something to look beautiful. It also has to function beautifully.
If you've never seen an IBM Selectric, folks, I would encourage you to Google this, because it was a startling departure from the typewriters of the day. It had that little ball in the middle, and you would press a key and the ball would jump up and hit the paper and make an imprint there through the ink. Later on, I believe they had this Selectric 2, which would back up and correct things. Now, my mom was over the moon with the first Selectric. She thought it was like the internet is today. But when they did that self-correcting thing, she was one of the first ones to run out there and buy that from my dad's office.
Yes, the correcting Selectric 2 was, as you said, very popular. Such a game changer to be able to actually go in and try and correct, one small little typo that you might have made. I'll also put a plug in for our website. So if you go to ibm.com/history, we have lots of great stories on there, and one of them is about the Selectric.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
When I went to school, there was a best-selling IBM computer line called the 360 and the 370. It was designed in part by Fred Brooks, who went on to teach at UNC Chapel Hill. And my understanding is, and I wanted to ask you if I got this right, that my iPhone now has more computing power than the IBM 360 did.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. You can say that about pretty much any of the original computer lines that came out in the 50s and 60s and even into the early 70s. Yes, as things have become more powerful and more compact over time, we really truly are walking around carrying little computers with us everywhere we go. And these big, massive systems that once existed would have had less computing power, but yet they were still able to accomplish some really wonderful things.
Oh, absolutely. And the IBM 360, you needed a room for one of these. They were big.
Yes, they were. Very different from what people picture today as a computer, where you would have something that sits at your desk and might be a single device, maybe a few speakers. This is a case where you would have had to have multiple units to make up the computer system. You would have had to have an operating console, probably several magnetic tape decks for storage. You would have had to have a CPU and a memory device.
Card readers.
Peripherals like card readers. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Paper tape readers. you would have disk drives existed, but they were the size of ovens.
Yes, absolutely.
And I remember at UNC, there was an old broken disk drive, and you open it up and there was a spindle in the middle that would spin, just like today's disk drives, but much larger. And the staff of the computing center had taken this broken disk drive and basically turned it into a blender. And so they would go in and put something in the blender, attach it to the top of the disk drive, and then give it instructions from the console on how to make a milkshake.
That's a first. I haven't heard that one before.
And the story goes, when Fred Brooks found out about this, he was furious.
I could picture that, yes.
Yes.
Considering how closely involved he was with the creation of the System 360.
Now, when did IBM and its computer line adopt design? Because if you go back, for instance, in a lot of the movies in the 60s and the 70s, you see the very sleek computers with the blue fronts that is the color of IBM, and you can tell it's all nicely branded. When did the company decide to use branding as a strategy for sales?
The design program was founded at IBM in 1956, and that was with Elliot Noyes as the first consulting design director. And that happened because of a friendship that existed already between the CEO at the time, or president at the time, I should say, Thomas J. Watson Jr., who had met Elliot Noyes during World War II. So Elliot had worked on a few projects within IBM in the 50s, redesigning a boardroom, looking at a model of an electric typewriter, and then was asked to form this design program. And it was after that that you start seeing things starting to come together, because Elliot also brought in other designers of the era that could address things like architecture or graphic design, industrial design, and starting to take a look at how can design infuse everything that's coming out of IBM, not just the advertising and the marketing, but also the look and the feel of the products themselves. And so you start really seeing this in the 1960s and going forward, where you start having standard color schemes. A lot of attention is paid to the look of the machine itself. It could feel sleek and new, and getting away from the way that the products used to look before that, which was not necessarily always uniform, and there really wasn't that much attention paid to the outward appearance.
Now, Jamie, you keep track of a lot of records. Do you also have stuff? Is there like a warehouse somewhere full of old IBM products?
We do. We do have a selection of them. We would never try to have one of everything. We would be a little bit like that last scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark if we tried to do that. But we do make a strong effort to try and keep examples of product lines as well, because in many ways, they're also a record of the business, just like a paper file or a digital file or a photo or a film, because it's a record of what the company used to produce at a specific time. You know, what were clients looking for? What was the industry looking for at that time?
And what are some of the fun things that are in the Raiders warehouse?
You know, I'm often asked what's my favorite, and I feel like that's like asking to pick a favorite child. You should never do that. But one of my favorites is that we have a portion of a machine called Sage, which was developed for the Air Force in the 1950s. And I will say definitively it is a portion of it, because an entire Sage installation would have taken up a 4-story building at one point. And there were several of these installations across the United States. So we have a portion of one from an Air Force base that was decommissioned, probably about 40 years ago. It's in beautiful condition, but it's one of those machines that's really large, and it has lots of switches and dials and blinking lights. And it looks exactly like you think it would look as a computer from the 1950s. And I know it's been used in backgrounds in various movies over the years, too, if someone is looking to show a computer from that era.
Do you ever get any requests from people who are trying to read some type of media? Say they found a computer tape in their grandfather's trunk and are trying to figure out what's on it.
Yes, we do very occasionally get requests like that, although I typically have to refer them to someone else, like a vendor who specializes in extracting old media. While we do have a wide assortment of machines as part of our archives collection, we're not a living computer museum just because of the sheer amount of effort that it takes to keep even one machine that is very old up and running again. It would be a full-time job, really.
And that's expensive to run.
Yes, it is. Yes. So we make sure that we're the best caretakers that we possibly can be, but we don't attempt to actually restore the machine or make it functional again.
Are there any museums that work on maintaining the machines? I heard that there was a very large one at NASA Ames in California.
Yeah, there are several computer history museums worldwide, several in the U.S., some in Europe that I'm familiar with. We definitely keep in contact with each other. Mm-hmm. For example, there's the Computer History Museum that is out in California, and they have at least a couple of displays with a RAMIC and then an IBM 1401 that they've been able to get running again through the hard work of many volunteers from an IBM perspective. And of course, they archive. I mean, they have more than just IBM products as well. So I'm sure there are other machines too that you can go and see that are operational. And it's really cool. I think people really enjoy the opportunity to be able to see one of these vintage computers actually working and how they used to function.
Yeah, that would be pretty sweet to see that. Has IBM returned to its corporate roots in the sense that it doesn't really have consumer-based products anymore? It's sold off its personal computer division, right?
Yes, that was sold off quite some time ago, back in 2004, 2005. There are still products that are a huge part of the IBM business line, but now it's the Z system. So we're talking about servers that are geared more towards businesses and not individuals. So it's still a huge part of the business, but as you said, it's not geared towards consumers. And
can you still buy an IBM Selectric?
You know, I see them all the time on eBay and other places. So yes, there are collectors out there that are always people who are either looking to buy or looking to sell. You can see them sometimes in antique stores or stores that specialize in typewriters in specific.
Yeah, I'm looking here on eBay. There are a couple of them that are like $100, $200. And the little IBM typewriter balls are like $15, $20. So they're still out there. And I had the pleasure of typing on one a couple of weeks ago. And it just was a thrill. It just brought back the great ease at which it was to type on a keyboard like that.
Yeah, they are still incredibly popular. And for some reason, certain colors like the red are some of the most popular ones. As you said, there's also the fonts themselves. There are, of course, the standard fonts that you would expect to find with most typewriters, but there were some highly specialized fonts that were created as well, like dance choreography would be one example of that. Yeah, it's different languages beyond English. So it was a way for people to be able to easily customize what they were needing to produce.
Just one last question. Besides being involved in this movie about Elliott Noyes, you also provided some background for the movie Hidden Figures. Tell me about that.
Yes. So I was lucky enough to be able to work on the Hidden Figures movie in the background. And that was a case where the film studio approached first IBM and then, the IBM Archives because they wanted to be as historically accurate as possible. It's a film, it's entertainment. So, of course, there are things in there that perhaps didn't happen in real life. But as they were trying to portray the computer system itself, how it looked, how someone might operate it, they really wanted to understand that as well as they could. So that was a situation where we were able to provide things like photos, again, operating manuals, schematics. You're not going to find a system like that in real life. So they had to recreate most of it for the movie, and they wanted to be as accurate as possible.
It's a great movie, and I loved watching it.
It is. I really enjoyed it as well.
Jamie, thanks so much for talking with me.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to your show.
You can see all the houses of Elliott Noyes at usmodernist.org/noyes, Noyes. Washington State native Paget Moren left at 18 to pursue a degree in jazz at New York's New School University.
Go Narwhals.
She spent 8 years singing the national anthem at Madison Square Garden and at the Staples Center, and her latest EP is called Here, released under the name Win. Here's George's conversation with Paget Moren.
Paget, I read that you have sung the national anthem a lot of times, like hundreds of times at Madison Square Garden. Is that true?
That is true. Yes, the Canadian and American anthems for years.
And was this for games?
Yep, for games, for the Knicks, for the Rangers, for different events that they had there. When I finished college, I just thought, how can I, do the coolest thing in front of the most people? And I had done the national anthem in Seattle, where I grew up, for the Mariners for years. And so I just walked over with my little demo CD, because it wasn't the days of sending your recordings over email, and brought it to them. And magically they called me, and I just kept going back. It was such a fun time.
So this is kind of a residency like Billy Joel, just on a smaller scale.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I wish it was like Billy Joel, but yeah, I guess I've played there a lot of times too.
So how many times have you sung the anthem at the Madison Square Garden?
Oh gosh, I actually don't know, but I did it for about 8 years, probably a couple times a month. And then I moved to Los Angeles and did it at the Staples Center too. It was kind of just a gig that I loved doing. So just kept doing it wherever I lived.
Did you do the Canadian one too for like hockey games, I would guess?
Yes, I did the Canadian one for hockey games, and hockey games were actually my favorite to do because the crowd was just so rowdy and there to have a good time. No one was that serious. So during the anthem, they'd be calling things out like, let's go Rangers. And it just kind of took the pressure off a little bit. Singing for a sports crowd is very different than singing for singing a jazz gig in front of an audience who's there just to listen to music. Both are wonderful, but singing in front of a sports group is a little bit more rowdy and fun.
And if I recall correctly, the national anthem for Canada is O Canada, right?
Oh, Canada, yep.
Oh, Canada, da, 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 right? Is that?
You got it.
Okay.
I might be out of a job.
Yeah, Madison Square Garden, I'll give you my number. This first song, Stardust, written in 1927 by Hoagy Carmichael, and it's been recorded on albums about 1,500 times, probably more. It's one of the most recorded songs in history and always makes the top 100, top 50 lists of best songs of the 20th century. It's been recorded by everybody in the American Songbook, from Glenn Miller to Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, and even Willie Nelson, who made an album called Stardust that was very popular. Here's Paget with Stardust.
And now the purple dusk of twilight time steals across the meadows of my heart. High up in the sky, the little stars climb, always reminding me that we're apart. You wander down the lane and far away, leaving me a soul that will not die. Love is now the stardust of yesterday, the music of the years gone by. Sometimes I wonder why I spend the lonely night melody haunts my reverie, and I am once again with you. When our love was new, and each kiss an inspiration. But that was long ago, and now my consolation is in the stardust of a song. Beside a garden wall, when stars are bright, you are in my arms, the nightingale tells this fairy tale of paradise where roses bloom, though I dream in vain. In my heart you will remain, my stardust melody, the memory of love's
Paget, that was great. I can see why people wanted you to come back to sing over and over at the games.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Tell me a little bit about your grandmother, who you described as your soulmate.
Yeah. I started singing when I was really little just because my grandmother was a singer as well. And we used to spend all our time together just singing around the house. And she introduced me to, the Great American Songbook, jazz artists, and older singers who sang the standards. So I kind of developed an old soul feeling for music through her. And when it came time to go to college, I thought, of course, I want to study jazz and study sort of what she did because I'm just so inspired by her. Yeah, so that's what I did. I went to New York and studied music at the New School University and sang from then on. And it was all because of my go-go.
And you've been composing songs too. Tell me about Freedom.
Yeah, so I wrote Freedom after I had left Los Angeles. I was there for 5 years and wasn't having a great experience. So the song is pretty much about ridding yourself of someone or something and finally being free, finally getting to be your true self. So when I wrote this, I had just left LA and was living in Seattle, where I'm from, sort of resetting my heart and all of that. But the intention was always to move back to New York. So I recorded it in New York with a wonderful producer, Barb Morrison. And yeah, felt like I was on my way to rediscovering what I loved and how to bring sort of that soul and jazz into the pop world. It was a wonderful song. I was really proud to write it. And then I did, right after that song, move back to New York. And then the pandemic hit. So I hadn't really written anything since then, because I wasn't that inspired during the pandemic. Some people were, but for me, it all has to line up. So I didn't write anything for a while until I met my husband in 2022, who is he inspires me. He's supportive of my creativity and kind of helped me bring the joy back in my music. So I'm in the early stages of starting to write a new project and I'm giving myself time. I love that in New York, it's not about being famous. It's more about living in your art and feeling that you're authentic in it. So yeah, working on that right now. But Freedom was the catalyst.
Here's Paget with Freedom.
to coast. I was bones trying to shake our ghost. You would warm me like a band of gold on your arm. You were the snake I tried to charm, but I've let go. I've let go. Freedom, 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 freedom. Freedom, 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 Scream now out loud, this voice is mine, and so low I've served maximum time. The stories that I've held all run through my veins, giving power to my name. 'Cause I let go. I let go. Freedom, 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 freedom. Freedom, 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 freedom,
Paget, I can't tell if that's a breakup song or a song about getting out of Los Angeles.
Kind of both. Both went hand in hand.
Okay.
I'm happy to be on the other side now, happy and in the sunshine and in New York.
In New York now, since you can't take CDs around like you did with Madison Square Garden, how do you go about getting gigs and places to perform?
A lot of it is just people I know. In addition to being in music, I also work in events. So I've been doing that for quite a long time, like planning weddings and different parties and things like that at hotels and other venues. I've just started up with a new jazz quartet. So we've been playing around the city, just in lounges and at little happy hours, and really just getting back into it slowly.
That's really cool. Paget, thank you so much for talking with me. I can't wait to see you perform somewhere live in New York.
Thank you so much. I can't wait either. Next time we talk, I'll have a few gigs lined up.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle Square Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Okay, Tom, finish us up.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 21,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.3 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by archivist Kelly Policelli. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. George and I'll be back soon with another As Seen on TV edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.